morning or good afternoon. And thank you so much for giving me the spot just before lunch. It's always the hardest one. Well, one of my first memories is the sound of snow rushing past me to the rhythm of my mother's movement. She was cross-country skiing across the Norwegian plateaus, and I was being pulled behind her, lying protected in my sled, looking up at the sky. For me, silence and sound has become important parts of how I value places. I grew up by the ocean, and the ocean to me is more sound than anything else. The sound of waves when I, as a young child, fell asleep in the sailing boat. The hollow sound of water underneath when it hits the rocks under the pier, and the peaceful silence when I swim underneath. We all have different entry points and different stories of our connection to nature and the places we belong. And as I grew up by the ocean, it has become an important part of who I define myself as. Sometimes I wonder if I belong more to the sea than to anything else. Immanuel Kant once said that it is in nature that we can be at peace with who we are. We perceive ourselves as whole in nature because there is no discrepancy between who we are as moral beings and who we are as natural beings. My long-standing engagement in environmental issues started accidentally when I, as a child, spent my summers in my uncle's boat, roaming across small islands looking for things we could play with. We found plastic cans, old fish nets, ropes, and all sorts of exciting treasures. As a grown-up, I still collect plastic on beaches, but now it's with a sad heart and not the same joy. I often return to a sentence in a paper clipping I've saved from over 15 years ago, which comes back to me again and again. Can you hear the ocean? It's saying, "Save me." Over these 2 days, you won't hear my story of the ocean. You'll hear the story of someone else. Its founder grew up on a small farm. And it's no coincidence she founded this initiative. As a doctor and a farm girl and an environmentalist, it is as much about the story of Dr. Gunhild Stordalen as it is a part of her soul. We are living on a planet that too is saying, "Save me." Mother Nature is an incredibly fine-tuned ecosystem, of which we all are a small part of. As we know, climate change and human land use are emerging as the greatest challenges of our time. We have never before had such a vast amount of scientific reports on the changing climate as we have today. The effects of climate change are becoming more visible in people's lives. Yet, in spite of all this, public concern for global warming has paradoxically decreased over the last 25 years. We clearly have a communications problem. So over the years, as my understanding of the complexity of environmental issues has increased, so has my yearning to learn more. And this year, I'm studying green growth at the Norwegian Business School under Professor Per Espen Stoknes. In his new book, What We Think About When We Try Not to Think About Global Warming, he argues that climate communications we have seen the last decades, in spite of the best intentions, have ended up making people feel helpless and wanting to ignore the disturbing facts. Now it has become as important to understand the human response to the climate crisis as it is to understand the climate systems itself. And one of the reasons we do not collectively act seems to be that the whole issue has been presented as a distant but threatening doomsdays to us. And typically, threats and fear trigger a fight and flight response in the human brain. So if I do a little experiment here and say CO2 emissions, carbon monoxide, global warming, disaster, does that motivate you or weigh you down? If I say mountain air, white winters, buzzing bees, coral reefs, it makes you feel a little bit better, doesn't it? But it doesn't solve anything unless we believe that framing can do a lot about people's willingness to acknowledge and act. In the traditional climate framing, there has been few practical solutions where one can act meaningfully. People tend to, and sometimes rightfully so, to question what on earth does it matter that I ride my bike to work, while people all over the world still use coal as their primary source of energy. It is complicated. The consequences is that many, myself included, end up simply by avoiding the topic with dissonance and denial instead. Therefore, I believe we need a whole new narrative on green issues. We need to emphasize green choices people can make in their everyday life and make it simpler, more meaningful, and more fun. Rather than more doom, we need to tell stories and show visions of the society and the world we deeply want to sustain. We need to remember the experiences of nature each and one of us treasure in the places where we live. And most importantly, we must create a grounded hope that we can and will choose to be a part of the long-term solutions and no longer a part of the problem. The climate story is ultimately one of identity. And if we are to make climate issues relevant to people in their everyday lives, we need to connect it that's something people can all relate to. Food is one of our most daily interactions with nature itself. The food we eat have great implications on how we feel, on our health. Food is what sustains us. So EAT is not just a conference. It's a new narrative and the climate story. It helps us relate to concepts that are overwhelming and incredibly complex. It shows us how climate is inextricably linked to food production and biodiversity. It shows us how we need to practice sustainable farming if we are to feed the Earth's nearly 7 billion inhabitants. It shows how we have to fight for my beloved ocean to do so. So let me take this opportunity to tell the consumer goods industry present, please use less plastic. Please ban microplastic in your products. Find other, more sustainable methods to pack our food. Please farm our oceans safely. I won't go more into this, because otherwise you'd have me talking about this for another couple of days here on stage. EAT is a narrative that helps us understand some of this complex matter and make it into something tangible. And EAT is an ongoing initiative that has managed to pull together a group of institutions and individuals who will no doubt leave a lasting mark on how we research, produce, and trade food. That is no less than impressive. It is a beautiful afternoon here in Stockholm today. I would like to send a kind thank you to the royal family of Sweden. His Majesty King Carl Gustaf has been a long-standing supporter of the environment. His daughter has followed in his footsteps and studied these issues related to climate change under, amongst others, Johan Rockström. But today, most of all, I would like to thank Dr. Gunhild Stordalen for connecting the dots for us. I am incredibly proud as a Norwegian to see you change how we talk about food, health, and sustainability. You have more than anything shown us that there is truth to Margaret Mead's words. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In closing, I would like to say, we need you. We need all of you scientists and researchers, activists and business leaders, philanthropists, and politicians present here today to help us understand the complexity of these issues. We need to hear that it's possible and that we all have our part to play. We need you to show us how we together can save our planet and ultimately save ourselves. This February, my father-in-law, His Majesty, an environmentalist at heart, visited a research station in Antarctica where he stated, "Our children are going to be much more reasonable than we have been." I truly hope he is right. But more, I hope we will rise to the occasion now. It is the small drops of water that creates an ocean. Thank you.
Bravo!